Mary Carr's story in The Liars Club takes place back in 1961 in Leachfield, Texas. The 60s are characterized by its fight for civil rights, second-wave feminism, and the war on poverty. People were becoming increasingly aware of racist and sexist behavior and protesting in any way they could, whether that involved people of color blocking off whites-only places or taking more violent routes, like setting things on fire. This resulted in programs like Medicare and Medicaid to be started up, and the 1963 Equal Pay Act to be enacted. Dramatic changes were made in the 60s, but it wasn't all perfect. Women were still expected to be stay-at-home moms and to be fulfilled with their domestic life. Those who did work faced harassment. Some jobs, since grounded in a patriarchal society, forced women to leave if they got married or became pregnant. This same society is evident in the Liars Club. Charlie, Mary's mother, deals with the expectations placed on her that she should be happy being a housewife. Her discontent with the expectations originates from having come from a more liberal New York, where a female living on her own and earning her own income is more common. Once in Texas, however, the only thing a woman might dream for is a deep freeze filled with deer meat she'd cleaned and dressed herself, or a fat vinyl ottoman to prop up her swollen feet on at day's end. Here, her dream is supposed to be completely dependent on her husband's. She shouldn't ask for anything other than a deep freeze filled with deer meat. In other words, her happiness should derive from the achievements of her husband. The wife is also given the job of cleaning and dressing the meat, a prime example of stereotypical domestic behavior, which shows that women are typically responsible for storing and cooking the meat, the less physically demanding task, while the husband's job is to go out and hunt. The women are also portrayed as shallow and materialistic, with their dream consisting of simply wanting a piece of furniture. This also shows how the women were expected to take care of the aesthetics of the house, like furniture. Mary herself also comes to learn that women aren't treated the same as men from a very young age. She shows understanding of what role she plays and what importance is given to her. When she is 7, she's raped by a teenage boy in her neighborhood. After he's done with her, she mentions that he didn't even have to threaten her to keep quiet. She knew what she would be if she told. The boy uses her as an object. He never talks or looks at her after the deed, and despite only being 7, she seems to grasp the idea that if she tells anyone, the world wouldn't be on her side. She would get blamed for his actions, and then labeled by the rest of the neighborhood as someone who is asking for it. The theme of faulting herself is continued when she's raped again, but this time by her babysitter. This leads her to think that being smart just makes certain words go scooting through your head, leaving some bad word vapor that a mean man can pick up on. In this case, smart refers to being smart-mouthed. By the second time an incident like this has happened to her, she's completely accepted the idea that she is responsible for being taken advantage of. That somehow because she is smart-mouthed, she deserves or is inviting people to do horrible things to her. Despite all this, the women in the Carr household strive to break the mold of the traditional woman. This is demonstrated when Lisa, Mary's sister, brushed aside the .22 pistol of a gunman demanding her jewelry and opened her Mercedes while the guy ran off. Typically, a woman is equated with submission and expected to wait patiently to be rescued by a man. Lisa clearly breaks that idea by neither being submissive nor waiting for someone to come rescue her. She takes matters into her own hands by refusing what the gunman asked, and instead ordering him to leave her alone. She also demonstrates bravery for being able to brush aside a dangerous weapon, with the capability of taking someone's life, especially when it's pointed at her. Another character that challenges the idea of conforming to societal standards is Charlie. Her first marriage happens in the 1930s, when she was around 15 years old, and during that time, while in New York, she doesn't act shameless enough to border on scandal. She took a job, full-time, doing mechanical drawings for Bell Labs. There was still some reluctance in women getting jobs in the 60s, so a working woman during the 1930s was essentially unheard of. But Charlie doesn't take that in regard when deciding to work. She only considers her want to paint and endeavors to achieve that. The only reason, however, that no one stops her from taking that job is because of the bombings at Pearl Harbor. Labor was needed, and preventing that seemed unpatriotic. Apart from that, she marries 7 different times in total, which in and of itself is a defiance as it goes against the belief that women should be in monogamous relationships. Throughout the Liars Club, female characters are subjected to rules that they should adhere to just because of their gender. In this man's world, Mary gets taken advantage of while Charlie's expected to derive happiness from other people's achievements and not from her own. But characters living in those very environments defy those rules and stand up for themselves. Lisa takes control of her own safety and wards off a robber, and Charlie acts on her own accords, and she gets herself a job.